Stuart, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we're here to talk about Annelise, the new addition to our team as our chief business officer. I'm incredibly excited for this. I've been waiting to introduce her to the community a little bit more. I know they've seen some stuff from her. I'm sure they've scoured her LinkedIn, if I know the community as well as I do. So today, right, we really just wanted to sort of introduce her and have everybody in the community learn a little bit more about her background, some of the things she has coming up, and why we're so excited to have Annalise here on the team at Kadena. So I think before we bring Annalise up, I'd love to just start with you, Stuart. Right now that Annalise is on the team, obviously, we had sort of this job search going for a chief business officer. I was wondering if you'd be willing to just sort of talk to the community a little bit about sort of where this came from, what your sort of vision and idea was in the beginning, and how we sort of got to the point we are now.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to the Kadena team for putting it together. And thanks to everybody for showing up and listening and, being introduced to Annalise. We're super excited. And I just can't be more excited about this. It really goes back to the very beginning of Kadena because, one of the things that when Will and I founded Kadena coming out of JP Morgan, we were really concerned that blockchain didn't have what it takes to really bring benefits to humanity. And let's be clear that those benefits to humanity would come through making blockchain kind of safe for business because, the thing is that users want to use apps. Apps are run by businesses and businesses, are the people who, work their hardest to try to bring value to people on the chain. So, Will and I are technologists, and there was a lot of important technology problems that needed to be solved. And Kadena, to this day, is unmatched in terms of how we approach some of these problems, just being a different approach that focuses on safety, that focuses on true decentralization, that focuses on actual scalability. Because, back at JP Morgan, if we had gone to our bosses there and said, hey, we got this great app, but you can't upgrade it. If it gets popular, it's going to cost way too much money to run because of gas. And what's more, your transaction might not even go through because of congestion. That was the goal. And that's what we really want to bring. That's something that we're still hungry to prove to the world is that blockchain can be a better experience, that it can be safe, that blockchain can have the scale that's demanded by these great new use cases that are coming out in real world assets in TradFi. And so this CBO search was, kind of a long process that started with Francesco leaving the company a little over a year ago, and but Annalise really stood out because it's become clear that to really address the challenges that are in the blockchain space and really make it work for people, it's not enough to have great technology. You really have to have somebody who can put the pieces together for the business side and can understand the technology to the point that they can really point out the benefits to people who are, they have businesses to run and they have real world problems that they need to solve. So it's not just anybody who can do that. And Annalise has already more than established herself as a thought leader and an expert, as somebody who goes very deep on these topics and somebody who can really put it all together. And not to mention just with a ton of enthusiasm and energy. So we really couldn't be more excited. I personally couldn't be more excited. Annalise has joined the team, and Kadena is entering an exciting new phase, and I'm glad you all are here for it, and I'm glad you're here to meet Annalise.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, even the times that you and I have talked about it, Stuart, I think we've both shared our excitement equally. I've never been more excited for more work, I think, in my life. So it's a great thing, right? And I think the really interesting thing here is that before we bring her on, like this isn't like a shift in direction. This is just sort of an expansion of all of the other great, amazing things we have going on. So it's just sort of like pouring fire on or pouring gas gas on a fire, so to speak. So I can't be more excited. I know that everybody that I've talked to internally, we're all just very very thrilled to be able to have somebody of her caliber on the team. So I guess without further ado, if somebody in the audience could do a drum roll, please, that would be great. I just want to introduce everybody to Annelise. Annelise, are you there?
I am. My goodness, I'm so flattered. Thank you guys. I love all of the excitement. I guess I keep hearing the word excitement, but I'm super flattered to be here. I love the company. I love what I'm doing, and it's great to join such a wonderful team of people.
Well, we're so happy that you're here. This is our community, right? The vast majority of them live here, sort of on Twitter. So I've prepared them. I've told them all to be nice to you. So I know they're very excited
They're
as
going to be
well.
nice.
They will be.
Our community is great.
They are.
Ah, great.
So, I guess, just in sort of the spirit of, the spirit of open conversation, like I'll just sort of give you the ball, right? Tell us about yourself. Tell us where you came from, right? Like give us sort of your elevator pitch.
Sure. Elevator pitch is shorter, but yes. One, it's super exciting to be able to speak to all of you. I have not, this is my first time on X Spaces. I don't use Twitter as much, but I will start using it more. I've been more of a LinkedIn person, as you might know already. Anyway, it's great to meet all of you. Some of you have reached out to me and sent me notes on LinkedIn, so thank you for that. And where do I start? So, I did traditional finance for a long time. I worked in commercial real estate in Europe first with Jones Lang, and then first in Ukraine and then in London. And then I came to New York for business school. I wanted to study kind of more finance and Wall Street. And I worked with a company called WP Carey, and then I worked with Moody's. And so my big focus was how do we um, I wanted to learn finance and how do we make commercial lending more efficient was my first step. So that was the beginning of commercial mortgage-backed securities, which actually took the risk off the bank's balance sheets and decreased the cost of lending. So that was interesting. It was very, complicated structures of bonds that were sent out to issuers. My job was to assess the risk on those bonds. I spent 12 years there running the commercial real estate finance team or group, and then after I left, and I was kind of more on the world of entrepreneurial kicks, and I did a lot of board work, and I got into the space in 2018 by a very energetic group of lawyers, younger lawyers that asked me to join this cryptocurrency and blockchain regulatory task force focused on regulating ICOs. And so I knew about Bitcoin, and I always thought digital money made so much sense, but I didn't know as much about blockchain. And so they were very very energetic, kept calling, and so I sat down to learn what it really meant. And of course, the more I studied blockchain, the more I recognized what it meant for finance. So I don't think finance is broken. I think finance can be upgraded. I think it's amazing what the crypto world has created in DeFi. And I think the two will eventually merge. I think there's a lot of benefits both sides can bring to each other. So I found a partner back in 2018 who had a broker dealer, and we launched digital assets back there. It was Propeller, if any of you guys were around then. We were merging with AirSwap's parent company, Fluidity, and we did some really great deals that we were looking at how do we create traditional financial structures on chain. And so we were doing some private placements at the time. We were also working with institutions because they were very interested. We work with a lot of banks, asset managers. I'm trying to think of who was like we were working on a series A, and we had loads of institutional interest. And it delayed, and the market changed in early 2019 when we were looking at closing, and so that kind of fell apart. But it was really interesting to work with a lot of banks on proof of concept deals back in 2018 and 19, right? So right then, the only real institutional deal that came out was the Aspen St. Regis, which is one of the few deals that is done in a traditional structure that's out there today of real world assets. I know others have been done in real world assets, and I know the treasury market's taking off, but I feel like that was really one of the first that had come out. And one of the benefits of that people don't really think about is it gives you a utility benefit along with the investment benefit. So people can invest in owning a share of the Aspen St. Regis, which is a hotel in Aspen, Colorado. And then they also get, upgrades when they go. So that's something I feel like the crypto world is given is a different take on giving benefits outside of just straight investments, and I think that will grow as well. So anyway, fast forward, I worked at Arca, which is a crypto hedge fund. Arca Labs, we were focused on generating innovation within the institutional space. We had a money market fund of US Treasuries. We were the first one to come out, tradable peer-to-peer, approved on ATSs. It's not a stable coin because it is a security, so you have to be whitelisted to own it. But the idea was, instead of holding cash, you could hold shares of the money market fund, which is called Arcoin, and it would generate interest. And so you would make interest on kind of holding your stash of cash. So did that, and then I left. I left last June, and I had one of the things with institutions understanding kind of finance is education. And I think a lot of people tie Bitcoin to blockchain and don't know the differentiation. And having working with institutions for so long, I just thought it made sense to give them something a little more educational. Also, this is after Luna and FTX. And so I figured this would be helpful to kind of differentiate why this technology makes so much sense for finance. And so I wrote a book. So I wrote a book last kind of summer, fall, and which is coming out soon. It's called From Hoodies to Suits: Innovating Digital Assets for Traditional Finance. And it's really it's an educational and entertaining book is how I look at it. So it's not just a textbook. There's a lot of books out there, none of which were on capital markets or Wall Street. And this was really kind of aimed at corporates, senior executives and finance people, about recognizing why this technology is so great, what it can do for them, kind of how the world. I also think the world of finance is changing, and I think it's important not to be left behind. And so this technology, I mean, we can dive into questions if you have questions, but I feel like this technology is making a big difference with the coming generations that expect so much more to be digital. Also, the world of alternative investments is that really only corporates are investing in alternative investments now, and more than half of the wealth is in the hands of the retail, is us. And so it's opening up more opportunities for retail investors in the alternative space. And that's really, I have wild ideas of where the world's going to go. Unfortunately, it's going to take some time. So, we're here with a longer mindset of, yes, we're going to continue to innovate and we're going to continue to make paths, but kind of the world as we see it is going to take a few years to get there. And then I had, finished that up, and I had this wonderful opportunity to join Kadena. I'm super excited to be here. I think it's a great group of people. I think they have created an amazing technology. And I think that, the way that I look at it is this technology, and Will and Stuart have done an amazing job pulling this together, and also continuing the business. And my goal is really, how do we grow it from this great base? And so the technology is really based off of proof of work in Bitcoin and all the benefits that Bitcoin brought, but also solving some of the concerns that Bitcoin had before, like with speed and price volatility of costs, and scalability. So I think that we have, I think that Stuart and Will have solved that. And really my goal is, how do we expand that to a broader base, to build on chain? So if that is that that's not an elevator speech, so I apologize for drowning on, but that's really that's my story.
I love it. That was the longest elevator ride I think I've ever taken. But no, that's fantastic, right? And again, I mean, I love the fact that you're sort of walking through all of this, because a lot of this is just sort of the next iteration of where blockchain is going, right? And a lot of these sort of examples that you use, I know I personally have sort of used them in my everyday life, trying to explain sort of what we do, to non-tech people. So I think it's a very interesting story. And I love it. I think it's just another pillar of sort of what we need. So, one of the things that you and I have talked about, right, and you alluded to back a moment ago, is sort of like where this sort of traditional financial space is going, right? How are we going to help bridge sort of the Web 2 to the Web 3 gap? And we as a community and as a team talk about this all the time with innovative products and partnerships and things we're working on. But from your perspective, and you obviously have, a great deal of knowledge around this, is, what are the biggest challenges that, Kadena is going to face when it comes to really getting Wall Street and these traditional financial institutions, like, from embracing this technology? Like, what hurdles do you see, and how do you think we're going to overcome them?
The biggest I thought was education, people recognizing that, what we have is decreases risk, because always the risk departments are concerned about what additional risk is this coming on, is this bringing on, why should I change when I've done it this way forever? But I mean, think about that, right? Like, the world is constantly changing and upgrading and innovating, and so, like, look, we have we're talking on a supercomputer, right? And so we all have one in our hands that we walk around with, that we was different than like the Apple IIe. Like, I remember growing up with our little computer and floppy disks, right? And so, look at the world today and how connected we are and how technology has done that. And I think that's really kind of what Web 2, I think Web 2 has done, and Web 3 is really that for value, right? And so how do we deal with, value and digital money? And so from an institutional perspective, so I think, it's not just banks. I feel like there's so many other use cases as well. I think there's, in corporates, like, different commodities, for example. I think there's a lot of benefits that blockchain can add value and efficiency. But I think really it's one, understanding the technology. Obviously, interoperability is something that we strive with. I think that's every chain works with that. And I don't think, every chain needs to speak to each other all the time. To be honest, I think there's a lot of use cases that's not the case. We can talk about centralization and decentralization. Obviously, we're really big fans of decentralization, but finance to an extent is centralized, in the sense that you have to know who holds securities. And the reason you have, which is regulation, the reason we have regulation is because investors have been screwed before, right? And so regulation is generally very reactive and not proactive. And so they're looking at how do they fix problems that have been around. So the centralized aspect is really know your customer, like KYC AML, which we have whitelists. Um, but obviously, our decentralized nature makes this much more broad based, and it enables us to reach more people and do it more efficiently. And honestly, I think even not even the retail, but even the business to business, banks to banks, that will be tokenized as well. So let's look at JP Morgan, which is where Stuart and Will had worked and created the first technology for their chain. So they've done amazing. Like, JP Morgan is really in the forefront from a technology perspective of what they've created with Onyx, which is their internal blockchain, and then the JP Morgan coin. So they're transacting, as they say, $1 billion a day using repo transactions and efficiencies, and they're saving about $20 million, which doesn't seem like much on $1 billion, but it's $20 million, right? And so there's always ways, and the more they do, and the more they'll save. And so I think that's a prime example of being able to show the cost savings on this, because I think there's different ways blockchain can both increase revenue and decrease costs. So until we have real use cases, as opposed to just proof of concepts, like, one-offs don't get to highlight as much on the cost savings. If you look at what Figure Technologies has done, they have done HELOCs on chain, and so, like, HELOCs are home equity loans or lines of credit. They've also done some home mortgages, and they've been able to show 150 basis points, so 1.5% of all their deal trends, all their deals, they've decreased expenses. So that's another great highlight of how this works in the institutional world. But I think you'd asked our biggest hurdles. I think it's really education, which is really the focus of my book. And I tried to be, I tried to make it fun. And I think you guys out there will appreciate, like, I referenced the Matrix in it and some funny things that to bring the crypto world there, but you actually have to read the whole thing to see that. But I'm not sure the TradFi people will understand that one as well. Um, but education, and then, interoperability, which we can work through. If you think, banks were built on old tech, and they have to continually upgrade. Well, it's hard to upgrade the tech. They build on top of the tech, right? Because they have regulations where they have to keep all of their files in place. And so that kind of is a bit of a jumble. So I feel like what we need to do is, obviously work with them to create that much more efficiently. And Stuart can talk to them about more than I can, but, I think there's not as much consistency group to group and within the banks because of them following regulatory requirements.
No, that makes perfect sense. A lot of that is probably new to a vast majority of people on this call, right? Like, traditionally in the crypto space, right? This isn't sort of what we this isn't sort of what we have been focused on. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective. I do believe education is, the biggest piece, and it's what, our teams have been trying to focus on. So, we'll continue to push that ball uphill, but it's really exciting to sort of hear what we're going to be working towards in the future. Now you have mentioned your book a couple of times, so you were kind enough to send me a digital copy, and I have been reading it. And the the sort of commenters that have given their I don't want to say blessing, but their thoughts on this are sort of a who's who in the traditional financial space. Maybe tell us a little bit about that book. I know it's from hoodies to suits, and I know it's sort of about that merging of TradFi and DeFi, but maybe you could just tell folks a little bit more around sort of where this came from and what the status of all of this is.
Sure. So it was really having worked in the space since 18 and figuring out how do I best describe this so that Bob can tell John. And the whole thought process being that it's digestible enough for someone that doesn't understand the technology, but even if you understand the technology, then you can learn a little bit more about finance. So the even though the target audience really was kind of for financial people, I'm finding a big audience in tech as well, just to share that out there. So it's not really one-sided. But it's really starts off with blockchain's not Bitcoin, with the idea of there's more to this technology than just a cryptocurrency. Like cryptocurrency was built on this technology, and it's real. Like look at the market cap. I didn't check the market cap today of cryptos, but it's a $1 trillion industry that was created by hoodies who had, and in my as I define it, hoodies really kind of are more the tech and entrepreneurs, right? And suits are more the regulated corporate world. But I really think there's so much that this technology can bring, and it will help the technologist and those hoodies working with the suits. I think that makes it possible. Like recognizing that we have finance has been around since the or beginning of time for the most part, right? Money and financial systems. And so we're just making it more efficient, but understanding what regulation is and why structures are in place is really helpful. So that's where that experience and those suits come in. So I start off by talking about that and talking about, Jamie Dimon talks about how Bitcoin is a pet rock, but wait, no, the technology of blockchain is amazing and we use it to move money. And so there's a lot of quotes in there, and then going on to really explain kind of what crypto is and what different coins are, and then on to explain kind of what was created and what DeFi is and why DeFi is similar to TradFi, because we have different terminology, but if we use the similar terminology like wallets and accounts, right? Or passwords and keys, like they're not that different. I'm not saying they're the same, but they're not that different that it's easier to relate. And so I'm trying to relate it together. And then talking about why these securities are so amazing, like why this technology is so amazing for capital markets, and what it can do, and then talking about what's already being done, because I think also what's important, there are so many institutions out there that are creating. Now I realize institutions are not the only use case. I do want to say this is kind of expanding, but institutions are, so much money flows through institutions, and so it just creates more use cases and it creates more active users. So um, so tokenized treasuries, for example, everyone that's doing these 40 Act funds, which is the 1940s Act of securities, for money market funds, et cetera. Also private equity funds. What else is being done? So different, so we have KKR, we have Apollo, we have Franklin Templeton, Fidelity's looked in the space for a while. So it's all these really big names of institutions, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and then, um, sorry, City. Okay, sorry, I was reading a note. Um, so we have that, and then it's kind of like what we've learned from crypto's mistakes, right? Obviously, people talk about headline risk, so there's been a lot of bad headlines, but let's drill down on that. What is it? And a lot of it has to do with the hoodies and suits aren't working together, right? So if we kind of look, at FTX, if there was more risk and compliance in the room, if there was more adults in the room, I guess, as I say, which you can look at for a lot of that. I mean, if you look at Luna algorithms, stable coins, some of this happens in, in traditional finance as well. Like there's been a lot of scandals in traditional finance. Anyway, moving forward, talking about what are securities, talking about regulation. I am not a regulatory specialist because I'm not a lawyer, but I brought in some lawyers to answer some questions just so we understood a little bit more. How do we create positive innovation, right? Smart regulation within innovation is hard to do. And then really going on to like how the world is changing, which is really the next generations, and this transfer of wealth is that there's a great transfer of wealth going to millennials and then Gen Z. So they will have a majority of the world's wealth, and they look at different things like look at GameStop. I think that could happen again, right? I think it's just different way for using social media and a different financial idea of investing. And then where I see the world going, which is where I spent a lot of time really understanding, like the world is going to change in finance in the sense that if I own my tokens and everything's tokenized, I'm holding that in my wallet, and so the bank isn't holding it in their accounts, because so the bank makes money by holding money and then lending it to somebody else. And if they can't do that because I'm holding the money on my own wallet, they need to figure out, one, how to work with me, or two, how to create opportunities to work around that. And so my last chapter talks about all sorts of things of how I see the world changing in time. So I feel like
That's amazing.
Long, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I never thought of it that way. I mean, that is sort of their revenue model of holding onto those funds and providing a yield back on it. So yeah, that does bring up a number of very, very interesting potential, I guess, hurdles we'll call it as we move forward. So yeah, that's fascinating. And I know you're doing a book signing at Consensus, right? When is the book going to be available, or is it already available?
Well, the book signing at Consensus is on Wednesday, May 29th at 4:45 in the town center. They call it Town Square.
Yep.
I'm on a panel just before that at 4:05, which is Which Way Wall Street, What's Next for TradFi. And then the book comes out officially on June 12th.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I've started reading it in all of my free time, but it's fascinating. It's making me think about sort of what we do from a blockchain perspective in a completely different way. So that was great. Stuart, if you're still around, I mean, this has been a lot of information. From your perspective, what does this mean sort of for our future? What are you most excited about? Like, how do you feel like this is going to really impact the direction of our business going forward?
I mean, I think well, the timing couldn't be better because, one of the things that is really part of this new crypto turnaround is the Bitcoin ETFs, is BlackRock coming out with BUIDL. And I think the most exciting thing for me personally is that Will and I kind of went out on a limb amongst our kind of enterprise blockchain cohort back in 2017 and 18 by making a hard switch to public blockchain. At the time, the belief was that serious business would never trust a public blockchain, and the only way this kind of stuff would ever move forward was on a private blockchain. And we had already, frankly, seen the writing on the wall for private blockchain, even though we were believers in what it could potentially bring. It was already becoming clear by 2018 that it was running out of gas. And I still believe that to be true. And what's more, now you have folks like Franklin Templeton, BlackRock, taking these tokens to public chains and really, really showing that they believe. So, I mean, in 2018, it was clear that all the innovation was happening on public chain. By 2020, it was impossible to ignore. And one thing I want to point out that, Annelise, with all her extensive knowledge, is still somewhat modest, because in the time that she's been here, she's completely gotten a handle on what we need to be doing in DeFi and what we need to be doing in esoterics, whether that's in sports or NFTs or anything like that. So the point is that this isn't like a pivot for Kadena. We're not dropping any of the things we've been working on. If anything, we're adding a pillar that is really, really important to make to realize the benefit of Kadena. And it's really going to work with everything that's already there. It's going to work with Marmalade. It's going to work with our fungible standard. It's going to work with it's going to work with the bridges that are coming online. In fact, these are all important parts of the puzzle. It's really important it's more important than ever that we get they get a high quality stable coin onto Kadena. It's more important than ever that we have bridges to the rest of the crypto world. It's more important than ever that we make progress on things like CDP and lending protocols. And it's really important that we get really high quality partners like we've been doing with MetaMask and Hyperlane. This is just the beginning. So the point being is that as we move forward, getting a roadmap that really puts all the right pieces in place and also takes advantage of the fact that we're going to be delivering a game-changing bridge with Lurk. We're in position to really be at the forefront of a whole new thing in crypto, which is a truly trustless bridge, which is, as everyone here knows, that's something that Kadena has struggled with, partially because we can't get behind a centralized bridge for many reasons. So I see a lot of things coming together with Annelise's arrival, and most importantly, it's the fact that there'll be Annelise's Galaxy Brain putting it all together with Will and I and with the rest of this team, because it's really a complicated puzzle to solve, but it's one we're in the best position to solve it. With the technology we have, with the team we have, with the focus we have, and so really we're all in. And I see TradFi now as, and you can't ignore it. You have to be thinking about how this is going to work with crypto, because if you're not excited by that stuff that's happening with BlackRock and with the Bitcoin ETFs and with real world assets, you're just not paying attention. So this is a really exciting moment for Kadena, and this is really how things are going to start to. This is where the transformation, this is where the acceleration and the transformation really starts. It starts today, and we're not going to stop.
Man, I love that. I'm so happy to be a part of this. This has been absolutely wonderful. So I just want to take and I want to thank you, Stuart, for making the time to hop on. I know that your time is incredibly valuable, and we take up a lot of it in a number of different ways. So thank you, Annelise. Thank you so much. I could not be more excited to continue working with you. I'm so glad you chose to come work with us at Kadena. I know that over time the community is going to really sort of grow to appreciate all of the amazing things that you're bringing to the table, because this is just the start. We always talk about sort of laying the foundation before you start to build walls and focus on picking out furniture of a home. So again, this just sort of level sets a little bit more. So just very excited. So I want to thank you both for your time. I want to continue to do this more and more as time goes on, but obviously, if anybody has any questions, you're free to drop them below in the tweet copy, and we can respond to some of those after this space. But again, thanks to everybody again. Thanks for hopping in. Could not be more excited about the future of our business and where we're going to take this. So appreciate everything.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Bye-bye, everybody.